Julian Robinson, distinguished representatives of 23 of the 35 countries of this inter-American body of electoral management bodies, observers, guests, ladies and gentlemen all. It is my privilege to call this 8th meeting of the Inter-American Association of Electoral Management Bodies to order. And it is my great privilege to welcome you first to Jamaica. This is the first time that a meeting of the Inter-American body is taking place in Jamaica. We are delighted to have you in this very special year because Jamaica is celebrating its 50th anniversary as a political independence. So it is our Jubilee year, a year of great inspiration for our country, a year of great pride, a year of also great reflection and commitment to the future. And therefore, it's very good to have you. I think you would have noticed that inspiration from our athletes as they ran in London. And I think you would recognize the special significance of them running in London in our 50th year. Jamaica has a record of having had elections since the first one in December of 1663. So we have a long history of elections. But for 280 years of that, elections were conducted outside of the boundaries of democracy. Since that election in 1944, we have had 16 general parliamentary elections, and we have had 7 changes of government. So we have a record of having 2 major political parties and of changing them every so often. And the body responsible for electoral matters have had to preside over such elections. I have to tell you that contrary to what is commonly said, although we inherited from the British a system of elections, because they had been conducted outside of the boundaries of democracy, they had all the flaws of a system so constructed and configured to serve special interests and not simply the will of the electorate. And the electorate itself was highly constrained. And therefore, as we celebrate our 50th year of anniversary as an independent country, one of the acknowledged achievements of the Jamaican people has been that we have reformed that system of flawed electoral processes to one that can stand up to scrutiny to the highest principles of democracy and the conduct of elections anywhere in the world. In fact, our last parliamentary elections was in December 2011, and it is acknowledged that these were the best conducted elections in the history of the country, most peaceful, and there was a transfer of power, should I venture to say that even to the last moment, it wasn't sure who would win. And the winners themselves, some were surprised at the results. So it cannot be predicted in advance of the expressed will of the people. And there was a very peaceful transfer of the reins of political power. So we are proud of our electoral system, and this is not just a matter of the election management body. It is, in fact, an accomplishment of the people. In fact, our election management body, Electoral Commission of Jamaica, has a unique composition. And that composition is that it has 2 members nominated by the Prime Minister, 2 named by the Leader of the Opposition, 4 jointly agreed on by both, and then those 8 unanimously elect the Director of Elections, and they form the Electoral Commission. And then we have an even more unique convention that although Parliament is sovereign because it is the house of the elected representatives of the people who are sovereign, that sovereign house since 1979 has agreed that any matter that is unanimously agreed by the Commission and signed by all commissioners, when it goes to Parliament, either as something to act upon, like boundaries, the delineation of boundaries, or it is a matter of law. Once that report is signed unanimously by the members of the Commission, it is accepted and passed into law without change. And that is a commitment of the parliamentarians. So it's a convention, it cannot be written into law, but it's something they have practiced and observed for the past 33 years. And it is one of the foundations upon which the changes that have occurred in the country have been made. We want to welcome you, I want to welcome you also to the Caribbean, the Commonwealth Caribbean, because in this hemisphere we are a rather unique little group. When you hear of the hemisphere of which the 35 members are elected, you always hear of Latin America and the Caribbean. There's North America, Latin America, and then this addendum called the Caribbean. And within that addendum called the Caribbean, there are these 12 small, independent, politically independent countries. And although Jamaica likes to feel of itself as big, it is still small, just about 3 million people. And the Caribbean is not defined, the Commonwealth Caribbean is not defined geographically because it includes Guyana, that is located in South America, and Belize, that is in Central America. But we have a common tradition. And like Jamaica, the Commonwealth Caribbean has a history of regularly changing its government. We have only had one instance in the region where the government was not elected by the people, but by another process. But we do have, and we have our own association, the Association of Caribbean Electoral Organizations. And because this is the first time that this meeting is being held in the Commonwealth Caribbean, on behalf of my colleagues from the other countries of the Commonwealth Caribbean, we want to welcome you to this part of the region with its own peculiar history of governance, which totally respects the democratic principles, and we are all moving in that direction. In fact, it was our privilege recently to observe the elections in the Bahamas, and it could not have been conducted to any higher standards than it was. And it's another example of that tradition. I am sure that all of us here are watching with great interest the elections that is taking place in one of our member states, the first democracy, first nation of this hemisphere. And we're watching with great interest the presidential and other elections that are taking place and to be held in November. And I'm absolutely sure that all of us who are in the electoral management business is viewing with some great concern a number of misguided electoral officials and state bodies that have been passing laws and taking actions that are totally contrary to the principles of democracy, and yet trying to justify those principles on lofty grounds. It's a sort of perversity when you can take the most blatant partisan action and then use high principle to justify them. And equally a cause of concern is the virtual tacit, the silence, and therefore almost the tacit approval of such measures. And when you think of the great history and tradition and the depth of American democracy, you would recognize that the persons and legislatures taking these actions is because of the depth of that democracy. That is not only federal and state, but it goes down to county and municipality. And therefore, with such a wide swath of people involved, you will have misguided individuals. That is the nature of humanity. But those who are so misguided should be instantly brought in back into line, because what they're trifling with are the very foundations of the democratic process, that those who hold public office and discharge a public responsibility with respect to the electoral process must never use that public office for blatant partisan purposes, because what you are then trifling with is the very foundations of the principle of government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And when you use your power, even with acknowledgement for these partisan purposes, you put at risk the entire process. I fear to think of what would happen if the leader of the free world is elected by a flawed process that tramples on the right of each elector to cast his vote and not to be excluded from the roll. The implications for all of us are quite severe. I only hope that these misguided individuals and what they're doing will not stand. And I'm sure you would all agree with me on that. You say, what right have you to speak of the American elections? Well, we are election management bodies, and we speak to each other about our concerns, and they often speak to us about our systems, and it is not outside the bounds of our rights to speak back, because such is the nature of the democratic process, that when it comes to elections, we are all on level ground. We stand as equals, with none being elevated to a higher position, save and except the position of adhering to the highest principles of democracy and of justice and of proper conduct. I therefore wish for you, as you are in Montego Bay, which is our so-called tourist capital, that in addition to all of the business that we conduct, you will venture out and enjoy some of this. I wish to tell you that Section 16, Article 7.5 precludes work on the beach. It is unconstitutional to carry work on the beach, and the beach is not far. So when you do that, please feel free to leave the work in the room and in your room, but not to take it there. We are well